In November 2020, the European Commission launched its rather ambitious strategy on offshore renewable energy. That strategy proposes that we increase the capacity of installed offshore wind power by from its current level of 15 gigawatts up to 60 gigawatts per 2030, and further on to 300 gigawatts per 2050. And this would play an important role in our ambition to accomplish the energy transition that we have ahead of us. Today, we have a panel here, and we will dwell deeper into the issues and opportunities of exploiting the winds of the Baltic Sea, especially in terms of what it means and what it takes for various stakeholders of the farm. A key question is actually how should we plan, govern, implement this whole process so as to maximize the benefits for local communities, on a national level, investors, but at the same time minimizing the harm it may cause for the environment and socially. These are also important topics of the sea profiling area at Åbo Akademi University that is hosting this session here today. My name is Magnus Hellström, and together with my colleague Taisa Portela, we will serve as the moderators today. Warmly welcome.
Hello, also welcome from my part. Today we are really excited for the presentations and the panel discussion from about a very important topic that has gained even more attention this year due to the urgency to achieve independence from Russian fossil fuels well before 2030. We have asked our guest speakers to prepare short notes about the offshore wind energy development, and after we will have a panel discussion, and this session will focus on the Finnish experience. And we also have reserved some time for questions from the audience towards the end of the session. Our first speaker is Professor Kari Hyhtiainen. He is a professor of Baltic Sea Conservation Economics at the University of Helsinki. He is currently involved in a project about the future economic potential of offshore wind power in Finland.
And next up, we have Mika Järvinen from Aalto University. Mika is a professor in energy conversion, and he is, among other many things, he is currently involved in producing and editing a new handbook for energy engineering students, which would really be path-breaking in terms of how those engineering students can cope with the ecological crisis in planning and implementing new power solutions.
Yeah, and our next speaker would be Anne Nummela. She's a regional planning advisor at the Satakunta Regional Council. And Anne has worked closely with the development of the marine spatial plans of Finland, and she will discuss about the planning process in the context of offshore wind energy development.
And last but not least, we have Anna Heger, welcome, from Ilmatar Offshore. Ilmatar Offshore is one of the companies that have expressed its interest in exploiting the wind areas around the Åland Islands. In addition, Anna serves as the European Climate Pact Ambassador in Finland. Was that right? Yeah. Good. So, without further ado, I think we start with short introductions from each panelist, and then we round up with a common discussion. Kari, please take the stage.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for invitation. I'm an environmental economist, and I look on the ways to take these environmental concerns and also some of the social concerns into account in planning economic activities. And at the moment, we have some 1,000 wind turbines in Finland, and the number of turbines are growing fast at the moment. Most of the turbines are located in the western part of the country. And almost all they are located on shores, but on land, not at sea. And even though Finland is a large country, we have a large area. It seems that with the increasing number of turbines, also the number of conflicts with local population is increasing. And this is something we have to take into account. And if the space on land becomes scarce, then sea is a natural way to move on. The thing is that the offshore wind is a little bit more costly than onshore wind at the moment. But increasing investments in offshore wind and technological development shrinks the cost difference. And it might be that in the near future we are in a situation where the cost difference is minimal. We are at the stage now in Finland when we should decide on whether we want offshore wind or not. And if we want, then we have to consider how to smoothen the process and how to make all the externalities as small as possible, all environmental externalities and damages to societies. And there are a number of considerations we have to think and discuss. And the first one is environmental concerns. We should develop instructions and guidelines for the industry that minimizes the damages to marine environment, all the species there. And noise from construction is one of the major things. These offshore wind plants, they need concrete basements at the moment. They are also floating wind turbines under planning, but they are not competitive at the moment. And we should also pay attention to minimize the waste to the environment. Another consideration is administrational. We should think on how we smoothen the process of licensing and maybe speed up, but without compromising the quality of environmental impact assessments and all the other steps that are needed. Also, a third aspect is international collaboration, and in particular with Sweden. We should create conditions for both countries that are equal for the companies to compete for the opportunities to build offshore wind. Another opportunity is to think on whether we need more transmission lines between Sweden and Finland, and how we transfer the energy from sea to land, and whether there are any opportunities to collaborate with our neighboring countries. Fourth consideration is research and innovation and research and development. And there are several promising areas that would fit very nicely with offshore wind. And one opportunity is the green hydrogen as a way to transfer energy from distant places to industrial outlets. Another interesting opportunity is so-called multi-purpose offshore platforms. And there are platforms offshore which combine different kinds of industries. There might be possibilities to combine food production and wind energy production, also combining wind energy with wave energy and so forth. Even there might be possible to increase tourism, to combine tourism opportunities and offshore winds. There are already some pilot experiments going on in Denmark on that possibility. So these were the four different considerations we should pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari. Many interesting thoughts. And Mika, please, a technical perspective on the offshore wind power.
Okay, thank you, Magnus. And well, good morning still to everybody. Yes, as an engineer, I was asked to give some technological development issues on this and potential technically what is available. Just to put us on the map, at the moment in Finland we are roughly producing 12% our power from wind, which is a huge development. 10 years ago this was 0, so it really increased a lot. And there are predictions that we would have in around 10 years, maybe 60 to 70% of the power would come from wind, which is amazing transformation. And if we go offshore, there is one, let's say, significant offshore wind park, which is at Tahkoluoto. That's about 40 megawatts. And 1 month ago, the government released seabed area, so that this area or this park could be increased to 900 megawatts. Significant increase, but also they released the area in Korsnäs. The range, what is planned, is 1.3 to 3 gigawatts, which is really big amount of wind power. At the moment, at the end of June in Finland, we had 4 gigawatts. So thinking about these new additions, we would already double the wind power capacity in Finland. So we are talking really big things. As an engineer, I can't help of talking some technical stuff, and if this goes too technical, throw me with something. So if it goes too deep, but generally, power output from a turbine, it's a strong function of velocity, of speed, wind speed, and size. And if we double the wind speed, power production increases by a factor of 8. And if we triple the wind speed, power production increase almost by a factor of 30. So it's a massive impact if we have 5 meters per second or 15 meters per second. On size, if we double the size from 100 meters to 200 meters, power production grows by a factor of 4, and if we triple the size, then it grows by almost 10 times bigger. So the size matters and the wind speed matters a lot. And theoretical maximum for getting the recovering the energy from the wind, we can roughly at maximum is 60% roughly. But it's free and it's out there. Finland has very good wind conditions, so why not? What is good news here for offshore? When we go offshore, wind speeds are much higher. Average wind speed can be 50% higher than on the land. So this third power law, it means that much more power is available. And also when we go to sea, there are no habitants, not in my backyard. It's not really an issue there. And they can be larger, rotate faster, and much more power is all that way. And the wind is also more stable on the sea. A very important issue for the fatigue of the turbine components, not so much shaking. They will last longer. But of course, when we go to offshore, there is the elements, there's rain, we have winter, water and freezing conditions don't really work together. So there will be sea ice, icing of the plates and towers and so on. But these we can manage. So certainly we have technical potential there. Then a few words about the technological trends going on at the moment. As Timo already mentioned, the price of offshore wind is a bit higher than on land. On land, the price is already cheaper than the fossil energy sources. So that is perfect, but we really need to do more R&D work to decrease the price on offshore as well. And we need to ways to decrease the price. One option is to increase the size. Also the foundations, as already mentioned, that's something that we need to work on, but also how we install the turbines on the sea. That's really expensive process because they are really huge, and it costs a lot to take them on the sea. And in general, technological development trend is that the larger, the bigger. And this is possible on the sea. And the largest turbines on the markets are at the moment from 10 to 14 megawatts. So in rotor diameter, the one that is rotating, it means 170 meters to 220 meters. So think about this kind of thing on your backyard. It's really massive size. And there are prototypes for 15 to 16 megawatts already available, and then the size is something like 240, 250 meters, and the tip of the rotor goes almost to 300 meters. So they are really massive systems. And these should be on the markets next year late or 24. And when we go to the sea, there's more wind is available, so we can estimate that roughly 65% they would be, if they run full-time 65% of the time, that is the power that is available. On the other hand, on the land, it's around 40% of the time they would run full-time, if we calculate it like that. Yes, so this offshore requires foundations on the seabed. That's one challenge, and really a lot of development. How can we bring the turbines to the sea? That's ongoing. But yes, this was most of me. But to really get an idea of the scale, visit a wind park and take a look at how huge they are. If you go in the close to the turbine, you really realize that they are huge. And offshore, these new ones, they are absolutely amazingly huge. But thank you. This was all from me.
Thank you, Mika. Very interesting. So next up, Anne, please. Now we have had the economist and the engineer's perspective, and now the planning perspective.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So, as presented, I come from a regional council, and if we make it shortly, so regional council, every municipality in Finland belongs to a regional council. So we have 18 or 19 regional councils in Finland, and altogether 8 regional councils on our coastline. The main purpose or the main work for regional councils is promoting their area and their economics, and also planning, regional planning. So every regional council is planning their areas. The new thing is, according to Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, which is adopted to Finnish law, we are now preparing Maritime Spatial Plan. The first Maritime Spatial Plan was accepted by regional councils at the end of 2020. So it's pretty new just now. And the Maritime Spatial Plan in Finland, it is at a very general level. It covers very many sectors which are working there on the sea. For example, fisheries, aquaculture, tourism, wind energy sector. Also, we are discussing about environmental values, marine traffics, and so on and so on. And we will not forget defense questions and so on. So very many sectors are discussed on the Maritime Spatial Plan. In every situation, I like to mention that we see the plan, the Maritime Spatial Plan, as a discussion platform for all these marine sectors. So, we are now talking about the energy and wind energy, offshore wind energy. That is one important sector at our plans. In Maritime Spatial Plan, we have identified potential areas for wind energy. In Finland, the Maritime Spatial Plan is not binding. The regional plans, which are on territorial waters, they are binding. And from those plans, we go further into the more details in the municipality plans. Then, what is the planning? We like to say that the more information we get, the better plans we have. So the planning process, it's really much discussing with all sectors, with all the stakeholders. The processes are long, but the time is needed for the studies. And when we talk about the sea, very much is going on beneath the sea or under the sea level. So we have to take care of all the environmental values, and as I mentioned, all the different sectors. They are working on the same area, so all these sectors has to be discussed with, or the collaboration has to be done with them. I think we are going to discuss, or we already mentioned some very important planning aspects here. So the length of the processes, they should be smooth, but at the same time they should be thorough. All the parties should be taking with the process, and so on and so on. And as mentioned, the technical development has been huge. It's very every year the turbines become bigger and bigger. And as I mentioned, the Maritime Spatial Plan was accepted 1.5 years ago. We were living in very different world at that time. We didn't discuss that much about renewable energy 1.5 years ago. The world is totally different. So everything is going very fast. So how can we cope that in planning process? That is the challenge.
Thank you, Anne. I'm sure those are important, and we will discuss those in greater detail still. Next up, Anna, please.
Good morning. Dear participants, fellow panelists, and organizers of the Europa Forum 2022. We who are gathered here all share a mutual strive in understanding the support and resistance, the drivers and the barriers that offshore wind has at regional, national, and EU levels, as well as those we find with actors from local communities and business sectors. So I'd like to begin by sharing a story of my good friend Lovisa. Lovisa teaches violin to children and teens in the middle of our neighboring country, Sweden. She struggled many years with temporary positions, only to manage to get occupation for months at a time at best, as most in the cultural occupations do. But a few years ago, she was offered a permanent position in the cultural school in Skellefteå. When I talked to her today, the situation is completely different. She has got more students than she has time for, and the school needs more teachers and larger teaching facilities due to the growing number of eager students in the queue. Why? Because local actors and decision makers, together with business developers in Skellefteå, put their effort and resources into the green energy transition. And that's how Northvolt's battery factory ended up in the city in mid-Sweden that was struggling with decreasing population. A town that now has the luxury problem of making room for all those engineers, factory workers, and supply chain managers that move there with their families and seek a fulfilling life for all of them. One is enabling your children to learn how to play the violin. And honestly, who could have foreseen that that ripple effect from a collective decision from a multi-level stakeholders in Skellefteå would lead an increase in demand for violin teachers? My name is Anna Häger. I'm the regional manager at Ilmatar Offshore and a European Climate Pact ambassador from the Åland Islands. It's an honor to stand here and share the learnings on the matter that has passed all of our lips in the recent year for more reasons than one: the enabling and deploying of offshore wind in the Baltic Sea region. I speak to you today in behalf of two roles. One, as an actor who seeks to deploy offshore wind in the Baltic Sea region. And secondly, as an islander from the Åland Islands, a small autonomy of 30,000 people whose government has set its mind to being part of the green energy transition with all that it means. So how does Lovisa's story relate to offshore wind? Well, for starters, one of the primary questions actors and advocates for offshore wind is, how many jobs will this create? I can't say how many violin teachers your specific region will need, but when a community such as Skellefteå chooses to act and work and overcome challenges together, all levels of it will thrive and benefit, including the fields that are often marginalized and overlooked, such as classical music and culture. Green, resilient, renewable energy requires this from a community. But this is not the case for all actors around the Baltic Sea. Why are we talking about offshore at the European Forum? Because green energy is creating a diversion between us when we urgently need it to be unifying. We have to overcome a breaking point as mankind because we risk absolutely everything as we've allowed ourselves to become tribes, quarreling about details when we should be focusing on becoming a singular unity and a community that agrees to disagree but finds ways forward that will benefit the majority of us. Tribes can in this instance refer to political parties, offshore companies, fishermen, skeptics, renewable energy advocates, and those who want things to just be as they've always been. The difference between a tribe and a community is simple. A tribe is a closed entity that does not understand its place or the part in the whole of humanity, and may often believe that the whole is the tribe, meaning their own convictions, history, and shared values. All of us who sit here as panelists come from a separate tribe of our own. You also represent separate tribes in your fields. A community sees itself as an integral part of an integrated society, and that welcomes all. To put this in a simple analogy, imagine that tribes are pebbles. When thrown in the water, these will cause ripple effects that go a long way. It will cause them to also collide, and when you put the same pebbles into a bag, you will have one splash that whose ripple effects will go a long way. And that's how our society works in many ways. When acting as separate entities, the ripple effects of our perceived actions collide with others doing the same, similar, or even the opposite, creating a buzz of action but lacking a greater long-term effect. By instead sharing the collective force and weight of what really matters, the effect will be even grander and go further than we could imagine. So what is holding us back? I recently read an excerpt that pinpoints that matter. That we must realize that the energy crisis is not a technological crisis, as pointed out by the panelists. It's a crisis of ideology instead of pragmatism, of egoism instead of the common interest, of political short-termism instead of consistent step-by-step work towards a clear and credible long-term goal, and of ignorance rather than acceptance of basic economic principles and facts. So how can we create this green energy transition bag that holds together a community? There is, as you probably would have guessed, not a singular answer to this very vast question. But I can share with you what we at Ilmatar Offshore chose to do when we set out to be part of the offshore plan, a maritime spatial plan involving offshore wind that the government of Åland presented. For the position of regional manager, Ilmatar chose me. With my background in citizen engagement, community views on sustainable development goals and agendas, and societal renewable energy dialogue. And the first thing I did was to hire a communications specialist that also was in charge of citizen and stakeholder engagement. This is an odd move coming from the energy sector. It used to be perceived as such. But the fact remains that we are alone as an actor cannot solve the energy crisis just by aiming and planning offshore wind, as also discussed earlier by the panelists. No, we need to include all levels of society, invite them to be a part, not just to take part. We want to be transparent in dealing with the struggles, barriers, possibilities, and opportunities. And we, as an actor in the energy sector, need to be understanding, respectful, and patient to not lose the idea of that we need to lose the idea of that we know best and that we are a bit of besserwissers. Ilmatar is a renewable energy company and an independent power producer. And as such, of course, we seek to create good business. But at the core of the company, there is also a strive to include and empower a community in the same way that happened in Skellefteå. And to do that, we will need more than like-minded tribes that think, act, and reason and argue like us. We seek public-private partnerships to be part of and help create and sustain a community, because that is even greater business. So if there is one thing that I'd like you to take from you these days ahead, is that you, and in your role, you should strive to be part of a community and less of a tribe. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Very engaging indeed, and you nicely pointed out what may very well be at the core of us learning to exploit the wind energy offshore. I'm also, by the way, getting a post on the information wall here, so I will every now and then perhaps pick up something that I find here. One of the things was you mentioned the ripple effects, and here was one that mentions and highlights the fact that actually in Finland we have sub-suppliers that may, or suppliers that may very well be in the position to actually become major suppliers of these wind parks, which, well, I don't know if it's a ripple effect, it's maybe actually quite a direct effect. But anyway, I think nicely picking up on the topic here today. I'd like to start with a question maybe to all of you, but especially Kari, to you. You mentioned very interesting thoughts about how to what we need to think about when we go into this, and you mentioned 4 rather interesting things. In your opinion, if you were, and by the way, Kari had a very nice article in Helsingin Sanomat this summer where you sort of urge us to take action in this matter. But what would be your, how should I say, advice to the government that what are the most pressing problems that we need to decide upon now at this stage on let's say a national level in order for this process to go well?
I guess it's the question of the whole energy system, how to make it that there's a sustainable flow of energy in any conditions, and to make sure that the different ways to produce energy they go together well, and when there's no wind, there's something else, the other way to produce energy that fills the demand. So I guess that's the main thing, and Mika mentioned that the current plans for offshore energy, it's a huge plans, and there is under some stage of planning, was it 60% increase in so offshore wind would produce in the total 60% of the all demand, and that is a lot, and of course the government and the society should paying attention to make them to support different types of ways to produce energy. And so that is maybe the one consideration, and we will be facing the problems next winter. We all, I mean, there's limited opportunities to import energy, and energy prices is going up, and we will really face that.
Thank you. I'm sure. I mean, having this, holistic view on the energy system is quite important. Maybe, Mika, I would like to pass actually this question to you, but because, what is the issue here if we suddenly start to introduce a lot of wind power in our energy system from the technical point of view? Is that just like that, or?
Okay, thanks. Good. First of all, like with all renewables, they are variable. So you know that it's not windy all the time. We have nighttime, cloudy time. So with all, let's say that wind, the total wind power would be 70% of power consumption. What happens then? No wind, no sun. So we need to solve this, and it's a matter of energy storage. Very much, that's one thing. In these Arctic conditions that we have, especially in the northern areas, sea ice is a big issue. It can be meters long, especially this Ahtojää situation. It's really huge forces that are acting on the foundations. There's a lot of, I think we can do it, but it's not cheap at the moment. And also de-icing of the plates, rotating plates, if there is like subcooled water hitting on the plates, how to get rid of that. There's a solution. We are using heating, but that consumes part of the produced power, like we have production losses. Actually, I recently heard this issue that the vessels at the Baltic Sea are too small to install, and too few to install these big installations. And the harbors are too small, and everything is too small because they are growing. They don't fit into the harbors even. And finally, I don't know if it's a challenge, but I think someone mentioned already the electrical connection with the grid, submarine cables, how to understand and build those, and who is paying them. We have very nice grid company, Fingrid in Finland, that has been super active in installing these. So, and of course, there are already negotiations with them on building how to deal with this issue. But maybe these four things. So it's not like this, as you said, but we can do it definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. My question is to Anna Hager. Taking from your speech, I would like to ask, how can we accommodate the interest of investors, local communities, and the environment in the context of offshore wind energy?
It's a large question and many perspectives to be taken in. When it comes to investors, as we've established that the future is electrified with all that it means. So, of course, there is big business in enabling offshore wind. So, investments made in the green energy sector, I'd say I'm not the economic expert in this panel, but I'd say it's a sure bet. And given the interest that we get at Ilmatar, this is definitely the case. But when it comes to creating and sparking the interest and collaboration with the community, that is a whole other aspect, because what you need to ask yourself is, what is it in it for them to do this? So you always need to step out of your own comfort shoes and step out of your own tribe, as I refer to it, and look at the perspective of what can these people that represent their actions, how will they benefit? Because sometimes it's quite hard, as in the case with Lovisa, who was just the collateral ripple effect at the very long end, that they had a lot of people moving in because the factory needs a lot of workers. You always need to look at the stakeholders and how they are engaged and what is the socioeconomic effect that comes out of it. And creating a socioeconomic meshwork and establishing factors such as GDP and other effects long term is essential. But even more essential is the ability to communicate and show examples of what does this mean to you, and creating also a communication that is based on a terminology that is not academic, not expert, but a base level concept that enables people to be able to talk about it at their own tables at home, and also interpret what is being said in the media. And this is something that many experts struggle with. How can I talk in a way that is not at an expert level? So everyone benefits from communicating out of their comfort zone.
Okay, thank you. You emphasize a lot this local citizen engagement and the local benefits that offshore wind power can create. Could you tell us, you mentioned on your talk about the jobs, but what else, how can Finland, Åland, and local municipalities benefit from offshore wind development? Can you comment a little bit more on that?
Yes, of course. Well, first things first, it creates a whole new economic leg to stand on. Just that factor, with all of the primary, secondary, and tertiary ripples that comes from that. So it's very difficult to pinpoint and for me to just bullet out exactly how it's going to be. But I'm certain that those who are into municipal planning here, such as Anne, can most definitely talk more about it. But the fact remains that as an actor for offshore wind, we need to be inclusive in how we connect with these stakeholders and be open to, is there anything more that we can do? Are we looking at the same effects, the trickle-down effects, but also how can we engage local businesses and make them thrive? At Ilmatar, in Åland, we're looking at what can the local actors today do for Åland. Is there a large enough harbor? Is the vessels sufficient? And the answer is no. But does that mean that, okay, let's just scrap that idea of involving them, but enabling them, like, how can you prepare for the future? And that also means looking into, do we have the existing personnel available, or do we need to fly them in? So this is also taking that into perspective. These are years ahead when we actually need all of these things, but you need to take them into perspective and put it in a very early time frame. That, do we have educated, knowledgeable people that can actually work with the parks? And the answer is no. We need to involve the educational system, but also involve accommodation and hospitality. Like, everything in the sector needs to be moved to the early phase. And reasoning like that is not really something that I've come across quite often discussing with peers in offshore wind. So for one of those, we engaged with the Applied University of Science in Åland and enabled them to start comparing syllabuses with universities in Scotland and England to see if it's a possibility to actually create an education, a master's education, and also a build-on education on Åland, where people and students can go and get an offshore degree with the fact that Åland is very experienced in icing conditions, and that would be a world first. So we're very proud to be part in making that happen. So adhering to what you just said. So,
thank you. I also have a question to Anne Nummela. So we have discussed here some of the considerations and concerns about the offshore wind development, and you have mentioned also how when the MSP plans in Finland were developed or accepted a year and a half ago, we were living in a different world. So, what new issues does introducing this offshore wind energy give rise to, and what kind of steering mechanisms do we have for that?
We are now with this new plan we have. We are at the stage of monitoring and evaluating, and we are getting all the time new information what we have to do at the next round. So this development of wind energy or offshore wind energy, it's a huge. I'm sure we have to take it at the next round. We have to take it very seriously and look at all the figures and numbers and areas and so on very carefully. I think we are all the time moving a little bit more offshore. Now we are quite much onshore still. And what does that mean? We're talking about the local communities. Now the wind power areas, they are on their backyard still. But at the future, they might go further, but they are becoming bigger. And we were discussing about, you mentioned the power grid. That is very, very important question, where we can get the power to our grid, and that how we can link the local communities to this whole system. That is, I think, already now when we talk about the wind energy on the land, that question is very crucial there, because we have so many wind power areas there, and I think just now the local communities, they don't see what they benefit from that. They see the wind power, and they don't have the concrete or real benefits. They have to be taken into the development. They have to see if they get more jobs, if they can get more business, more livelihood on the area. That is really crucial, and we have to tackle that when we talk about the offshore wind. And I think we have to. This event is also a good place. We discuss about this, and I would like to see more discussion about this renewable energy. What does it mean? It's not just the targets, or it's not just the figures on the papers. It means that the power plants, they are there, and the people, they have to live with that. So this whole system, it's a huge. I don't know if I answered your question, but is it more questions?
Yes. Still on this topic, we probably have a mixed audience here, but can you comment about, for example, who oversees the process of licensing of offshore wind? Is it at local level, regional, national?
It depends where the wind power the offshore wind power area is located. If it's on the territorial sea, then it's the municipalities who are making the plan, general plan, and according to that plan, the building permits can be given. So it's a municipality. They have the key role. But then when we go to the economic zone, to the more further, then we have the different system. Then it's I think there might be some expert on this, but then it's the state of Finland, our government. We still have the environmental impact assessment process, what we have to do, and maybe some other permits, water permits, for example. But then the municipalities, and not even the regional councils, they are not a part of that licensing process.
Okay.
And I think that is something we should maybe discuss, if there is something the municipalities, if they should have some role. Because the grid is coming to the municipalities on their land.
I've seen that the European Union has the goal of enabling that the permitting process should go from, I think it's expected, what did they say, 6 to 9 years, depending on where you're at, to 1 year. And how is that feasible from their side, given the fact that Anne and me work with these permitting processes? I see to that they are handed in, and Anne sees to that they are being, well, dealt with. We operate both on Åland. We are interested. Ilmatar Offshore is interested in the maritime spatial plan that the government of Åland has put out, but also the EEZ areas and the territorial waters. We aim to operate in the entire Bothnia Bay, if possible, given the icing conditions. But I think definitely, it's, as said, it's not a technological issue. It's more that the largest barrier and bottleneck is the surveying process and that of the permitting process. So from that perspective, Åland is in a very unique position because we have our own government and our own permitting process with that. But we also need to factor in that we are a demilitarized zone, but we do need the permission to survey the bottom from the defense forces. So then also factoring in that we are located between SE3, in Nordpol area, that we are between 2 energy zones, the SE3, Stockholm area, and then also Finland, who has 1 zone. So we have a lot of experience when it comes to how to deal with getting cables to the island or on and off. And also, this is why electricity on Åland is quite expensive, because one factor of living on an island is that the grid connections cost thereafter. So from an Åland perspective, we know what we're up against when talking about deploying offshore wind. This is not novel to us. We've seen this before. The fact is that we now aim to put something out in the waters to actually start generating energy that can be exported. And maybe possibly a T connection to Åland as well. But let's see what that happens. Cables are expensive. But when it comes to the permitting process, there is no master plan provided by any actor, and this is something that can be really discussed on a political level, and maybe also take inspiration from the Danes, that they've moved the political debacle away from wind operations, that this is not something that is discussed in parliament. This is something that everyone has agreed that this is a great idea. Let's have the expert and the public officers discuss this and work without the political mandate hovering over them, that who is going to be the governing political party next year, next mandate. So we need to factor in that infrastructure, especially energy, is not really something that should be grasped as a political bat to be wielded during election times. And next year, Åland goes to election for our government. And I can assume the same can be said for Finland as well. This is a hot topic, but infrastructure is an enabler for our economy. There is no way to describe it in any other aspect. And given the fact that it's also now a geopolitical factor, also questions that is energy also something that should be included when it comes to our safety as a sovereign state.
Very interesting indeed. I'd like to turn to a point, Kari, you mentioned about the externalities, and that's something we also need to cope with. And Mika, I know you are an enthusiastic bird watcher or observer, and there might be, various environmental impacts. Maybe basically a question to all of you, but what are the possible environmental impacts here, and how should we actually cope with them?
Yeah, if I start, then...
Okay, you first.
Yeah, so there are several groups of animals that are suffering from noise and from like installments, new installments in the water. And the first one is the mammals, and in particular the seas, which are sensitive to noise. And then there are birds, are like natural group of animals are suffering from wind turbines, and that should be taken into account, or is taken into account in planning, so that the turbines are located in places which do not harm, which are not in places where birds usually go and move. But then there are like a number of other groups of species, like insects is one. Some of the offshore and onshore turbines, they attract insects, and this is something that we maybe do not consider so much, but it's like the number of insects has been decreasing, and this species diversity is getting more and more important, and this is also one consideration to be taken into account. So these are the groups, and you know the birds.
Okay, yeah. Do they attract mosquitoes there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Could you please, I had the last slide I sent, maybe that could be on the background while I talk. So, yes, so I fully agree that we need to take these issues into careful consideration already in the planning phase, and that's like the UVA environmental impact analysis, that's what it is. And to do this, we need multidisciplinary teams in the development. And it has been nice to notice that the big Finn companies like OX2 and Ilmatar, they have hired already like biologists in their teams that know this. Very nice. About birds, of course, in the map here on the right, there is this map that has green and red. The red is the sea, that's the wind potential. And then there's map of different birds migrating. And we need a lot of research to understand what are the migration routes. And for me, it was a surprise that this lower, the Kuovi, it really goes through the whole area. On the other hand, the gooses, they have this Arctica, that they go like almost in line through certain. So we need to understand this. And there are bird radars. For example, in Tahkoluoto, the first offshore park, they have this bird radar that if there's a lot of birds flying, like on the left-hand side, you see a big herd of gooses on the air. They stop the turbines while the birds are there. And these kind of things are there. We have the technology, very nice things. You mentioned the mammals and fishes under the water. And we have the cables there. They might affect the migration routes of some mammals like whales and seals. That's if not, there are not really. I'm not actually sure if there are. There might be one little whale at Baltic. What's not don't remember the name, but in English. But anyway, those of course we need to avoid protected areas. That's clear. And then an interesting example is. If, for example, if we have a floating turbine that has the cables attached, and then there's the power cable, they are very good homes for mussels, for example. They're original no mussels, and then they live there. In a way, lots of new species there, and then they have this when they poo. Well, everybody knows that, but have debris that has as fertilizer. They have nitrogen from the air or the water, and there's debris. So there's like fertilizing that area, and then this is like rehevöityminen. What's the term in?
Eutrophication.
Yes. So that's the kind of issue. We might change the habitat completely by these. And of course, everybody knows climate change crisis, but there's also biodiversity loss crisis. So during this process, so is it a trade-off? So at all times we should aim to have no net loss of biodiversity, but unfortunately we might need to do some compromises there to minimize the environmental impact. But yes, so it's not without issues, but we need to understand and have good people working on these topics that we minimize the harm that what we make in the transition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I can continue from this. We were talking about birds and mammals, and also during this maritime spatial planning process, we used the data the Finnish Environmental Institute had collected, the so-called Velmu data, underwater data, and that is quite unique what we have here in Finland. And the latest municipality plan what the municipality is doing here or there in front of Pori area, Tahkoluoto, they now decided that the turbines should not be built on the areas which are under 15 meters because of the nature values. So every place over, which is more depth than 15 meters, they saw that there is not that much important algae and so on and so on. So we need those studies. Every time we make a new plan and a new power area, we get more knowledge about also from the underwater conditions. And that is a rising discussion. You were talking about the mussels and how they can come to those turbines and what are they called? The underwater foundations. So there's quite much discussion coming about compensation. If algae or mussels, if they can, let's say, filter the water, get the nutrients, if that can be seen as a compensation. But that is something, it's not there yet, but it's coming.
Yes. I can fill in from a biologist point of view. My undergraduate is biology also, so I have that up my sleeve to reason as a biologist. It's become very useful, I've noticed the recent years. But looking at, we do reside in an era where we are heading towards our next big extinction. So when we're looking at the loss of birds and insects and disturbance of mammals and crustaceans subsea, of course, this is a factor that needs to be taken into place. But then again, what is the opposite? If we don't do anything, we will still have a climate that is heating, a eutrophic sea that is dying from oxygenation, lack of oxygenation. So I see it that we need to do something because it's not looking like we're going to use less energy anytime soon, quite the opposite. And if we begin with the insects, I don't know actually how many insects you can find more than 40 kilometers out from the nearest plant or pollination area, 350 meters up, but my guesses are they are quite few. When it comes to bird migrations, yes, of course, this needs to be taken into perspective with migrational birds and such. There are excellent studies made by the Environmental and Institute from Sweden and from Finland, and the collaboration thus is very crucial. And when it comes to the MSP for Åland, this was all taken into account as well. But of course, we need to do a sufficient EIA also when we start constructing. And also the fact that these platforms, these turbines could become a new source of eutrophic due to the excretions from birds sitting on them. Åland consists of 6,700 islands and islets. We have our fair share of birds pooping on rock already. So we do know what it looks like, and that is why also you need to look at the potential off-takers and blue-green industries within these parks. At Ilmatar, we are looking at the possibility of constructing algae farms within the parks to create a new source of polymers that could be used and hopefully also replace many polymers that exist due to fossil fuels. So that is something that we can factor in as well. Another factor is that the Baltic Sea is eutrophic, and algae is excellent in creating a new biomass from its environment. So if we can catch two birds with one stone, creating new polymers and also simultaneously oxygenate the Baltic Sea, well, three birds in one stone, and extract nutrients from the Baltic Sea, why not? If we're out there operating, make the most out of these areas, because it will be needed in the future with polymers. And one thing that has not been brought up is the concern of microplastics, which is often an aspect that is brought up by those who oppose or are skeptic or maybe even frightened about, offshore wind. Offshore wind and wind power in general, wind turbines, the wear and tear of the turbine, of course, this is a factor, but it's not and will never be the major source of microplastics. The major source of microplastics is when you sample microplastics found anywhere in the world. It's from clothes, and it's from tires, and it's from the garbage that doesn't end up in the recycling centers. So if microplastic is truly a concern for those who oppose, they should start by inventorying their own closet.
Quite right, and I, in general, I take it that you are quite optimistic about our ability to handle those few environmental concerns that there might be. But I would like to actually hand one question to Kari and Anna, as you said, that yeah, there might be some challenges with this, but what are actually our options? And I know, Kari, that you have been researching this issue, that if we, for some reason wouldn't, what options do we have?
Yeah, thanks. So at the moment we are processing 85% of our energy using renewable or sources that do little harm for the environmental or people. And I include nuclear power in this class. And if we have a gap of 15% to fill in, which are at the moment produced using fossil fuels. And so the ongoing plans are for onshore and wind only would easily fill in this gap. And and one question is that whether we need offshore wind. It's not it has its own faults also, but it has a lot of benefits. And as you summed up, those negative externalities could be somehow solved and taken into account. So I see the offshore wind as a very good opportunity in a mixture of future sustainable energy system.
Another thing, Kari, that was quite interesting in your introduction was this cooperation between Finland and Sweden, for example.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, but also in that context. So, how does the EU play in this? I mean, if we're talking about an international arena here, how much freedom or what's the role of EU in this whole issue and so on? But you can also continue on the Finland-Sweden. If you want to elaborate on that idea.
Yeah. Also my colleagues and fellow panelists may have a comment on that. But the EU has a very ambitious plans, as you said at the beginning, as an introduction for offshore wind. But it has also faced a lot of criticism internationally that maybe the plans are a little bit over ambitious and taking the scale that is in a vision that would cause a major environmental impacts, also negative impacts. So this is something that is under elaboration now, and of course the EU has a longer-term vision, and it scales down to the nations and so forth. But there's a pressure, international pressure for clean energy, and offshore wind is one of those.
Okay. I think. Is there anyone? Well, maybe a question to Anna about this Finland-Sweden. That there could be some upside here that we as neighboring countries. What is Ilmatar doing, for example, or what is in the case of Åland? You have good connections to Sweden anyway. So, is there something to be done, and what is done already in terms of establishing collaboration between our two countries?
There is indeed a lot of discussions going on, but first things first, we need to know what the seabed looks like, and we are waiting for the government of Åland to grant us the surveying permit, and also from the Defence Forces of Finland. So once we know that, we can start establishing what possibilities do we have, what type of park, what type of foundations, what are the types of connections. But I would also like to point out the possibilities mentioned earlier about the off-takers from energy when in the creation of Power-to-X solutions, not just hydrogen, but also ammonia for the maritime sector. That is really something that we should look into even more, given that, in Åland's case, I'm guessing the majority of you has at one point visited Åland, but maybe not gotten off the ferry. So we have indeed a big, one of our biggest economic legs to stand on is the maritime sector. And this is something we also share with Sweden, the traffic in between. When you live on an island, you are very dependent on having good relations with the neighboring countries, in this case Sweden, and also keeping up the contact with Finland. Even if we don't share the first language, all of us, it's still something that we need to adhere to. But looking at Sweden, Sweden has a lot of interesting studies being done on offshore wind, and with these studies it opens up the possibility for collaborations, and I definitely see Åland as a great part in all of this, where you find the best of the best in Finland and the state-of-the-art technology collaborations between both Finland and Sweden, and we share the Bothnia Bay together, and Åland is located between this. And as an actor that comes from both sides in one way, we share the language of Sweden, but we share the culture of Finland, and also that we belong to Finland. I see this as an excellent collaboration as member countries of the EU as well. We have a lot to gain from collaborating with each other, and I'm more than happy to be a facilitator in this part. So without mentioning any specific projects and what we have in the Periscope, the future looks very bright when it comes to how we can collaborate in the Baltic Sea.
Good. Sounds promising. Okay, we are heading towards an end. I think we can afford one question from the audience if there seems to be one.
Puheenjohtaja, suomeksi esitän tekninen. Nämä merituulipuistot on tietysti miljardihankkeet, suuri talouden merkitys, niin kuin uudistuvalla energialla on. Meillä on tässä 60 kilometrin päässä Pemämekoulu, joka valmistaa siis hitsaustekniikkaa, automatisaatiota tuulimyllyä. Ehkä me olemme johtava siinä. Heillä on iso investointi, iso kehittämisprojekti, Turussakin toimisto, koska nämä on valtavia nämä 15 metriä halkaisia näillä yksittäisillä tuulimyllyillä ja siinä vaaditaan hitsaustekniikkaa. Ei maailmalla hitsaajia enää tähän varten. Niin tämä on niin talouden kysymys. Olen vähän kysynytkin, että siis kokonaisuutena voi olla Pohjois-Euroopalle ja Varsinais-Suomellekin tämä uudistuva energia, erityisesti merituulipuistot. Vai miten näette?
Anyone who would like to comment on this?
Yes, maybe a short comment. This is very much the case. Every sector is linked together. It's not just the energy production somewhere there offshore, but all these sectors are linked. It's a question of jobs or resources for education, and all these come together. So we need, I mentioned the discussion platform. We may not lose those connections. We have to continue with the discussion and get all essential parties or essential sectors with the journey.
Maybe yes. If I can comment. We used to have a Finnish wind turbine manufacturer, WinWind, earlier, and I have discussed with a couple of people and heard a hope that maybe someday we would have again a Finnish manufacturer. So with this way, I think we have lots of know-how in Finland on Arctic conditions and so on. So to this question, if we would have a Finnish industry to make those, maybe that could be something, collaborating with marine ship industry, for example. Just an idea.
Yep. Just a short comment. This is something which we were talking about the local communities and how we gain more acceptance. This is the core question. If we see what is our potential, how we can benefit from that, that is a good suggestion.
And Kari, please.
Yeah, just to follow up, this is opportunities for labor, opportunities for new business. These are also, of course, good things for the local community, but also there's a tax money coming for the municipality. But still we have to remember that they are not benefiting all of the people living nearby, and these are the people we should somehow bring in and to make benefiters as well.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have hopefully done a bit more than scratch on the surface. I think we touched upon many issues, and one important message is that we need to keep up the discussion, engage, become a community, not being a tribe. Thank you, and please give a big hand to the panelists.
Thank you.